Okay, very good. That's that. I think I'll go ahead and just jump in and welcome, unless do any members, we don't have a vice chair that's here tonight. My vice chair isn't with us. Does anybody want to jump in and facilitate, or would you like me to get introductions going? And here's Joaquin.
I was gonna say,
Here he is.
if we do introductions, Joaquin will probably join us.
Right? I think you're right. I totally think you're right. Well, let us go ahead and start with introductions while Joaquin's coming in. Tony, maybe we can start with you.
Hello, my name is Tony Marys. I am a member of the Disability Rights Task Force. I am a resident of Sequoia Crossings, a Salem Housing Authority property. And I am outside of a ward, but I guess I would be closest to number 5.
I'm Dan. I'm a member of the Disability Rights Task Force, and I run my own company, coaching and consulting for neurodiversity.
Dan, thank you so much. Let's go to our members in the Zoom room. Haley, can we start with you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Haley Berenbaum. I'm a member of this task force. I live in Ward 7 and I work for a labor union.
Thank you. And Christina.
Hi, Christina Ballard. I'm a member of the task force. I'm a commissioner on the Human Rights Commission, and I live in Ward 7.
Very good. And Joaquin, so far we've just introduced our members and we welcome you.
Thank you, Gretchen. I apologize for the tardiness on my part. I'm on vacation here in New Mexico, and we had to find a place for me to pull over and join. So good to be with you all. Looking forward to this conversation tonight. Just really appreciate the city staff, the planners in particular, for joining us this evening, and to all of you for being here in person and online. Do I round out introductions, Gretchen?
Yes, I think so. We'll have the chance to introduce Beth and Eunice as part of the presentation.
Great. Thank you. Did you receive any public comment?
None received.
All right. Are there any member remarks or announcements on non-agenda items? Is that none there in the room or online? Okay. All righty. Well, I really want to welcome Beth and Eunice back to this body, and they're here to discuss as planners codes for housing and some developer education with us tonight. And this is part of our ongoing series of conversations with experts as we continue to collate data and consider our soon-to-be recommendations to council and the general HRC. So welcome, Beth and Eunice. Thank you for being here.
I'm Beth Freelander. I'm a long-range planner with the city of Salem.
Beth, I don't know if your mic is on, unfortunately.
Can't hear you, unfortunately.
Now it's on, I believe. Can you hear me now?
Okay. That's better. Thank you.
I'm Beth Freelander. I'm a long-range planner with the city of Salem, and I'll let Eunice introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Eunice Kim, long-range planning manager with the city of Salem. Happy to be back with you all tonight.
So first of all, thanks so much for having us. So I'm here today to kind of go over and get your input on how the city or the planning division is proposing to advance housing accessibility through our code revision project and through developer education. So I'll just start with a little bit of background. The city developed a housing production strategy, which included looking at our unmet housing need and what the city could do to encourage housing development, including accessible housing. And so then the city adopted the housing production strategy, which included 17 actions that the city will implement to advance housing production and preservation over the next 6 years. And so now we're in the process of actually implementing those actions, and the housing code project and developer education are part of that implementation. And so I'm going to start just with the housing code project and the incentives that we're proposing to increase housing accessibility. And then I'll transition and talk about our plans and ideas for housing accessibility education directed more towards developers. And so we're looking at incentives for housing accessibility, type A accessibility, which is geared towards mobility accessibility. And we're doing that, looking at that for single housing, single dwelling units, and also middle housing, which includes like townhouses, cottage clusters, duplexes, triplexes, and quadplexes. And so for middle housing, we're planning to implement House Bill 2138, which allows one additional unit to a duplex or triplex when there's an accessible type A accessible unit as a part of the development, or up to sorry, excuse me, or up to 2 additional units for a townhouse, quadplex, or cottage cluster when an accessible or affordable for home ownership unit is provided. And then as a part of that bill, they also stipulate that we need to allow for increases to developable area, floor area, density, things that would enable them to actually be able to build an additional unit. So we can't just say you can have an additional unit and then put all these parameters that wouldn't actually allow that to happen. And so those are the things that we're planning to do for middle housing. For single family, we're looking at increasing our maximum lot coverage to 75% and reducing the minimum lot size to 3,500 square feet, and then reducing the side setbacks to 3 feet. So allowing the house to cover more of the property, and also allowing those houses on smaller properties if they are type A accessible. So I just want to pause there and see if those incentives, if you have any questions about those incentives, and then also if you have any thoughts on if we're missing anything or other incentives that would be helpful for developing these types of accessible units.
I just wanted to, on the single family option, I would only question for things like wheelchair use and for physical access. When it comes to outdoor leisure, is there going to be enough space for things like gardening or even just being outside on a bench?
That's a great question. I'd have to look at the actual type A standards. They're pretty well defined in the building code, and I'm not sure how much they stipulate for outdoor recreation, but
Gotcha. For me, that would fall under just quality of life type of features.
yeah, that makes sense. I think there's some like access way, like ensuring that people can use a wheelchair to get, outside to the like open space, but I'm not sure like about benches or things like that.
Okay.
Haley, go ahead.
Thank you. Sorry, I'm reading off the captions because I can't hear the greatest with what's going on. I saw someone had mentioned the wheelchair access with being able to do things outside and getting in and out. So I was just curious about that would fall under quality of life for me as well. But is there thoughts about how the ramp elevations and giving enough room for ramps to be able to not be super steep? Because I have friends personally who struggle with the ramp issues of trying to get up and down at a safe speed and just with their ability with dexterity and strength.
So looking at the ramp steepness is an issue, or like that's something that we should consider looking at.
And just to clarify, Haley, your question while Beth processes it,
Mhm.
are you referring to problems that might occur if you were to put a home, say, too close to a street front, and maybe
Yeah.
with the height and its proximity to the street, a ramp would be either difficult
Mhm.
or
And
unworkable?
and especially with like the quadplexes, duplexes, triplexes, if
Okay.
would the accessible unit be the end unit versus the middle unit, and how that would affect, not just neighbors, if not the entire complex is an accessible complex.
Eunice, I see your hand. Go ahead, please.
I was going to actually ask if we could take a quick step back on kind of what this project is and where we are going and kind of where it came from, beyond the housing production strategy. I'm happy to do that, Beth, or if you want to take a stab of kind of what we've done with our outreach and when this would go through and where we are.
Yeah, you can take the lead on that. I had a note on it but go ahead.
Sure.
That'd be
Yeah.
appreciated, Eunice. I mean, we you were talking
Yeah.
about it however many months ago, but you're
Yeah.
back now to us again. So good,
Yeah.
good primer. Thank you. Good
Yeah.
idea.
So as Beth mentioned, we did adopt the housing production strategy, which I think was still in draft form when I came last to you all. That has gone through the Planning Commission and the City Council and was adopted in May. Now it's going to the state for approval, so they are expected to review and approve hopefully by October. In the meantime, we are fast tracking this project specifically to work on regulations to lower barriers to housing and address accessibility, came up as a priority when we adopted the housing production strategy at the council. So they asked us to essentially get all of the ideas that we have around housing regulations, the ideas to them by the end of this year. An actual code amendment that would actually go through the adoption process and public hearings and actually change the regulations would be by the end of next year. So we've been doing outreach on different barriers to housing development with the development community. We've had several meetings with them. We are planning to have an open house in September, and we're going to be meeting also with the neighborhood association chairs and land use chairs next month as well. So we're still in that outreach phase where we're trying to gather ideas. So we're not writing any code yet. We're just kind of throwing ideas out there, hoping to hear input on what did we get right, what do we need to change, other ideas that we might be missing. So that's kind of where we are in the process. And again, that kind of package of ideas will go to council by the end of this year and just a staff report, no adoption. With this project specifically, as we're talking about accessibility, last time I came to the to you all, we talked a little bit about the range of disabilities that exist in the community and how physical disability is just one. And so Beth and I have done some research. Beth has done a lot of research, I should say, and also reached out to other cities, including Portland, to see how they have started thinking about other forms of disabilities and how on the planning side and the code side, we can or cannot, or should or should not, or what the landscape is for addressing those, because a lot of the changes or improvements or features that we talked about at our last task force meeting were really interior to the building, whether it was carpeting or less beeping right of things and insulation, things like that were really in the building code as opposed to in the zoning code, which really regulates the building form, where the building is on the site, how tall a building is, the specific use, less so the interior of the building. And so Beth has done a lot of research into different ways of at least educating the community and the development community of what could be helpful or beneficial. And so we had started thinking about, is there a way to start with education first on some of those ideas before moving into regulations? And so Beth, do you want to take it off from here in terms of kind of the research you've done and some of the ideas that you've found? Does that help clarify kind of where we are and where we're going?
I appreciate that. So
Okay.
as Eunice mentioned, we've done some research on housing accessibility beyond just mobility specific accessibility. And so I focused to start with on deaf and hard of hearing, blind and vision impaired, and then intellectual and developmental disabilities. So that doesn't include every possible disability or every possible housing accessibility need, but it gives us kind of a starting point for considering how we could improve accessibility for those disabilities, which there's also a lot of crossover between disabilities. So things that help people of one type of disability often also are helpful for other people, including people that don't have disabilities. So I'll just kind of go through, like, I have them organized by disability. I found that to be helpful to me. And I thought if someone was from a developer lens, if they were trying to build accessible units for a particular kind of disability, it made sense to lay them out in that structure. So I'll start just with housing accessibility for people that are deaf or hard of hearing. And so some of the common issues that people that are deaf or hard of hearing can face are relying on visual communication. So either through facial expressions, body language, ASL, or lip reading. And so being able to see people is really helpful, and things that can help with that are consistent lighting that has few shadows. So recessed lighting is one thing that helps. And then having open layouts with large sight lines, as well as wider hallways so people can walk side by side and are able to communicate while they do so. And then also the paint and colors that are used can be helpful if they're contrasting with skin tones. So that if someone's signing, that the color behind them is easy to differentiate. And then noise is also can be a challenge for people that are deaf or hard of hearing. Background noise can make it difficult to hear what they're actually trying to listen to. Assistive devices sometimes pick up background noise and amplify it, which causes kind of a strain for listening. And then also some kind of sound reverberations and echoes, things like that can be painful for some people with that are hard of hearing. And so things that help the acoustic quality of the house, like lower ceilings, flooring that is quieter, has like a padding underneath or carpeted, high quality windows that reduce outside noise, quiet appliances. Those kinds of elements can help make it easier for people that are hard of hearing to hear and to not have unwanted noise be disrupting them. And then finally, for things that they for systems that rely on auditory alerts, those should be changed to systems that have flashing lights or vibrations, such as like fire alarms or carbon monoxide. Doorbells are systems that are difficult to use as they currently exist for people that are deaf and hard of hearing, so making those adaptations. And then finally, having like automatic faucets or faucets with spring-loaded handles can help because sometimes people can't hear the water dripping, and so having an automatic faucet kind of eliminates that issue. And so those were sort of some of the accessibility features that we found in our research could be helpful with deaf or hard of hearing, but I'd be interested if there's anything that you guys are aware of that we can add to that list, or anything that should be changed.
I'll jump in here while people have reflect their thoughts. But Beth, these recommendations really resonate with me. I've been a hearing aid user since my late teens, and I can definitely attest to all the things that you're describing that contribute to difficult time, hearing folks around the dinner table or it really, and it can be very overwhelming. And I know a lot of folks who wear hearing aids, like myself, find themselves retreating from spending time with family and sharing in those common spaces. So I think that this sort of design perspective, I think, is really valuable, and it really resonates with me. So thank you for presenting it. Does anybody else have any comments for Beth on this section?
Just wanted to kind of echo that. It's like just reading through. I've had a deaf roommate before, and all of those things being implemented would be amazing. The only thing I would be concerned with the, even kind of jumping ahead a little bit, with the more technological advancements within the home, we would want to also ensure that the service that's being, the maintenance, is not being delayed. Because if a fire alarm is running low on battery and you have a flashing light in your house 24/7, it's going to be a little bit hard to ignore. So the maintenance response would have to be on par.
So I think I'll move forward with the housing accessibility for blind and vision impaired. So again, wide hallways that are clear of obstacles are helpful for people with a vision impairment or people that are blind, especially if they're using a guide dog or cane. Alert systems, specifically doorbells that use like a phone system, or often now they're video systems, although you might not think of a video system as being helpful, but the fact that someone could turn on the audio and speak to someone before opening the door, or if it's someone that's delivering something and it can be left outside and gotten when they at their convenience, those can be helpful for people that are blind or vision impaired, and kind of give a better sense of security if they can identify who's at their door before just opening it up. And then appliances and temperature control, even lighting, things that can be done by voice can be helpful. Or if there are like tactile or braille labels, either added or included as a part of the technology or appliance, that is really helpful. And then again, consistent lighting throughout the home with few shadows, and under cabinet and closet lighting that illuminates dim spaces. Those things are helpful for people that are vision impaired. And it allows them to, more easily identify obstacles or objects. Again, contrasting colors can be really helpful for people that are vision impaired as they navigate the home, especially if you're using contrasting colors to distinguish the floors, walls, and ceilings, or to indicate like a level change, the end of countertops so that they know where edges are. Those all help people as they're navigating the home. And then avoiding high gloss paints that cause glare. And then in the bathroom, walk-in showers and grab bars are helpful as well. Did we miss anything for mind?
Go ahead, Haley.
I think one of the biggest things I'm not seeing it. Oh well, now I just saw the Braille labels. I'm so sorry. The just Braille. I have many people in my life who are either visually impaired or completely blind with no light sensitivity, no anything. And I know the amount of times they have to bring out their own Braille label maker for every appliance, every like the AC, the thermostat, just anything is very annoying, and they have to use some of them live independently, so they have to use certain apps and rely on other people to tell them what they are labeling things to make sure everything's correct. So if all these things could come pre-brailled, essentially, I know that would be beneficial for a lot of them.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you, Haley. Any other comments, Beth?
So the kind of last category that I looked at was housing accessibility for intellectual and developmental disabilities. And I'll say in that research, that's a really broad category of disabilities. And so there may be things that I am missing from this list. And not all of these features will be helpful for everyone that has an intellectual or developmental disability. It does depend kind of what the disability is, and even beyond that, people have their individual needs. And so, as we know, there's such a wide variety of symptoms, needs, and preferences. So I wanted to provide that caveat ahead of time because I know that this is not exhaustive. And there's still more to understand, I think, in this area in terms of housing accessibility. It was an area that was a little bit more challenging to find information on, depending on what the actual intellectual or development disability I was looking for. But with that said, open concept designs and carpet can allow people who stim to do so safely. So stimming is like repetitive movement that can be self-soothing. And so sometimes people need more space to be able to do that, or a soft surface to do that on. And then in terms of the layout with defined spaces and transition spaces, some people benefit from having really structured space in their home where it's clearly delineated what the space is for in terms of which activity. And other people or some people also benefit from having transition spaces because it's challenging to move from one environment with that stimuli to a new environment with different stimuli, or from moving one task to another task, and having a transition space kind of eases that experience and can allow people to preview what's ahead so they kind of can prepare for that. And then I also found that keyless entry systems can be helpful, like pin pads, smart locks, or key fobs. In terms of temperature control and appliances, simple, easy to use designs. Voice control can be helpful for people that have maybe limited fine motor control or dexterity challenges. And quiet appliances also are helpful for people that are sensitive to noise stimuli. And likewise, kind of noise absorbing flooring also helps reduce noise stimulation. And then other people are, some people are sensitive to light, and so dimmable lights is also helpful. Calm and muted colors are kind of recommended, and sometimes people benefit from color coding to kind of cue the purpose of the space. So that sort of goes back to that defining the space and what it's for. High quality windows can reduce noise as well. And then as far as fixtures go, lever handles are preferred. They're easier to use for people with limited strength or motor skills, or automatic faucets also are another alternative. And then grab bars in bathrooms can help people who have challenges with balance or need additional stability or support. Walk-in showers and tubs can also be helpful for those folks. And then handheld or adjustable shower heads are also beneficial. Again, some of those it might apply to different developmental or intellectual disabilities and others but that was kind of the overarching list that I found from a variety of different sources, which are shown there. So I'm happy to hear additional feedback on that section.
Thank you, Beth. Would it be appropriate for someone if they had at this time kind of general questions to ask those of you now, or would you like those at a different time?
Also fine. Yeah.
All right. Anybody have questions for Beth on this last section or general questions?
I just want to kind of echo what we said on the other ones with representing this particular community as being my passion. I commend you on the research that you've done with this.
Thank you.
And I think a lot of these things are very well laid out. My question would be are these things implemented after a family has been chosen for the particular property? Are they adaptable and that you can change them out depending on who's going into the property? Or they're designated properties for each disability? Like, would there be a house set up for visual? Would there be a house set up for intellectual disabilities?
So I think what our kind of vision is to be able to take this to people that are actually creating housing and have them be able to like integrate some of these things, some or all, or as many as they want and can do into their housing developments. So I can't speak to like, would they do, X, would they do Y? But I think our vision is to point out like many of these are things that if they're done up front are low cost or the same cost as, as if they had done it differently. And so if we can introduce these ideas to developers up front and give them the chance to do it at the beginning, it saves, it doesn't cost them any money, and it saves someone else money from having to make those changes once they're in the house if they need those features.
I see a lot of these things are crossing over.
Yeah.
To where you can implement one thing that actually satisfies multiple.
Right, right.
And kind of pick and choose what's going to be the best options.
Yeah. So hopefully developers would look at that as being highly attractive. If I do this, it helps all of these different people who could, be moving into or purchasing the home that I'm building.
Yeah, I think I just found the blueprint for my next remodel of my own house.
Excellent.
So Beth, I think your final point is actually the one that I was going to hopefully ask you to make, which is that I think what's really attractive about these, other than just kind of their thoroughness, is that they're not cost burdensome for developers, with maybe the small exception, or not so small exception, of more expensive windows, which can be expensive for developers. These are things that candidly are probably things that a lot of more modern or more recent developers are already doing, but could do a lot more of, or could be found in a ton of different apartments and houses. And so I guess my question would be, maybe twofold. One, is this simply an education thing that changes behavior on the part of developers, or is it something that you feel there's an appetite to kind of codify in some way? Something, in other words, more than a request or a recommendation?
I think right now we're we're focused on the education piece and like kind of voluntary behavior change. There's, I think the second part requires more research for us on how we could actually do that. Because from a planning interior to the building, they're not things that the planning department
Of course.
would review for. And so then it's the challenge of who reviews it and when, and what's the mechanism for that. And then also making sure that each of those things is really well defined, so that it can be reviewed in a way that's clear and objective, so that we're not introducing bias into our reviews, if that makes sense.
Eunice, I do see your hand. I'll get to you in a second. The only other thing I might think of, well, this would also veer into a policy recommendation, which again may not be the place in this conversation, but it would be really nice and maybe fanciful of me if if we were to add among the already existing kind of incentive, whether loan incentives or other things that we have in Salem, to say to a developer who maybe has a building that doesn't quite meet these standards and they would like to voluntarily change their development behavior, to say, hey, you want to apply for a small grant or something to $20,000, whatever, to do this, to having some kind of grant program on the part of the city. I know again money is very limited and maybe we're here in dream world, but that would be an attractive thing to explore, I think, and maybe within the bounds of what the city has an appetite to do, that would help bridge the gap between infrastructure already existing and these kind of new goals of ours. Okay, Eunice, I'm sorry, that was my little spiel.
No, that's a perfect segue. I was just going to say, when we met with the development community, they said part of it is that they just don't know what's needed. And so that's kind of why we are starting down this path. I think we could bring these ideas back if you all think this is kind of the right starting point, when we meet with them again, to see what they think about these, and what if there was a way to incentivize them. We could certainly look into incentives, whether it's in the zoning code or financial or what have you, before going regulatory. And because like Beth said, the Portland example, they were looking just at visitability, wider, entryways, bigger turnaround spaces, and there was difficulty between the planners and the building folks on like who did what. But I think if we talk directly to the development community, which we're planning to do anyway, right, and bring this to them and kind of get their ideas, we could certainly come up with something.
That'd be a good conversation to be privy to too. Thank you for doing that, Eunice. Haley, go ahead.
I love this idea. I love the research and all that. My only fear is that unless we have some code change, essentially, these people are just going to take the education, look at it, and think, well, it's not required, so why do we need to spend the money to make this difference for a small population? That's my only fear, just from experience of dealing with people when I've been like, hey, by the way, this is the situation with your accessibility issues. And they go, well, we don't want to spend the money on the 5 customers we have that might be disabled, essentially.
I don't want to speak for the staff, Haley, but my understanding is that maybe this is the beginning of a series of conversations that may in fact result in policy or regulatory changes. But
sorry, I was supposed to start with that. My brain kind of went ahead of my mouth, so I apologize.
But I think the sentiment is shared. But I think there's a lot of behavioral incentives for developers. It's not cost burdensome, generally. 2, you mentioned your this theoretical or hypothetical 5 customers. Any aging tenant or any aging person would benefit from half to more of these recommendations.
Oh, yeah.
And so I think, and that's not a significant population. And my hope, which I think is a hope and not simply naivete, is that brings money too, and that brings further investment from developers to be able to meet those needs. So,
Fingers crossed.
any other questions for Beth or Eunice?
Tony here.
Please.
If I understand correctly, so basically the state legislature passed this House bill that is giving the city some opportunity to change building codes and things in order to streamline the process and make these kinds of building characteristics, for lack of a better word, more feasible for the developer. Am I correct in that assumption?
Yeah, it's changing our zoning code to give them an incentive that if they provide an accessible unit, that they're allowed to put another unit on there, which is, you know, increases the potential profitability of a development.
Okay, so what what this is saying is to the developer, okay, so you're going to build a 40-unit apartment complex, and if you make 10 of those units accessible, will allow you to make it a 50-unit apart. I mean, that I might be rounding.
This would only apply to our middle housing types, which are duplexes, quadplexes, triplexes, those
Triplexes.
2, 3, 4, or townhouses or cottage clusters. And so it does have some limitations to how much more development could be put in place.
Okay. Well, that kind of makes my comment moot, because I was going to say, it sounds like we're trying to build a relationship with the developmental community, along with the changes the city would like to see made. It would seem to me that Salem Housing Authority would be a place where the city could set an example, as they are currently in the push to make more affordable housing available. And we have identified that in the, poverty community, the percentage of people who have disabilities rises to what, nearly 80%. So I don't know if there's a place to go there, but I'd like to throw the concept out there. I also had made a comment to Gretchen recently about the city of Los Angeles just built a 200 and some apartment complex for that homeless community. And they started with shipping containers, and the savings in housing development is between 20 and 40%. So I don't know if that's helpful, but that's kind of the path that my brain is going down for this conversation.
Go ahead, Eunice, please.
I was just going to address Tony, your first comment, in that we work closely with the Salem Housing Authority and could certainly speak to them and share this list and ideas that they have as they continue to develop affordable housing and particularly affordable homeownership opportunities.
Thank you.
And maybe of interest to you and Beth both, our conversation we'll have after your presentation, the first part of which will deal with supportive housing at Sequoia Crossings. We had an outreach event over there, and speaking for myself, I thought it was pretty revelatory, kind of the ways in which needs are not being met for residents in some pretty fundamental ways, some of which were covered even in the recommendations that you were detailing moments ago. So Beth, one of my hats in the city is that I'm on the planning commission, and we talk a lot about infill housing, which I know we're not doing in Salem as such, but is this something that should that occur, that it could be mappable onto that sort of housing, or is this really just for middle housing as the city currently practices and encourages it?
Sorry, could you repeat your question? You're wanting to know.
I'm wanting to know that if we were to be more aggressive on beyond just middle housing, but really more into infill housing and infill development, whether these recommendations could map easily onto that sort of development, or would there be another series of recommendations based on those kind of more specific needs?
Yeah, I would imagine that for infill housing, like these would be potentially appropriate incentives.
That's good to know because we got some colleagues over there who are really pushing for that, and so it's good to know that these recommendations are scalable, or for lack of a better term. Thank you. Right. Are there any other questions for Beth or Eunice?
I would just come back to kind of the concern with the single family homes. So if I'm seeing this right, it's allowing builders to build more house on a smaller property. And so they're able to put more houses in like tract homes or so forth. That seems like it would be congestive and might even be counterproductive, because now you're putting additional homes in what would have been a large community with dispersed homes. Now you're looking at a large community with very tight homes. And I think that might be conflicting. And that's the only, like with the single family homes, that's my only concern there. But then I'd echo definitely working with Salem Housing Authority on implementing as much as is possible as an example.
Yeah, go ahead, Eunice.
All right. Do you think that the 3,500 the square footage is maybe not a good idea, shrinking the square footage of a single family lot then? Or is it more allowing more of a home to cover a lot at the 75% coverage, or both? Because they're just recommendations at this point, and so we can always rein it in.
Not being a builder, can't really reference the 3,500, but what I'm seeing is so reducing the lot size and
Okay.
I think that in general, that concept seems congested.
So kind of
Okay.
those
Yeah.
two things could be an issue.
Thank you.
More houses, but bigger and closer together.
I don't have a strong opinion. I think it depends. It's very need dependent, in terms of lot size and all that stuff. I can imagine a 100% lot size use that would be really conducive to building community and having someone, to take up that space and have more people live in. So I don't know. I think it just I would defer to the body, but I think either making it a little bit smaller or keeping it is
Joaquin,
go ahead.
this is Tony. I have another question. If we're talking about changing zoning or building codes, like, and, a lot size can vary in a housing development. Does the city look at housing density? Like, I guess my question is, what is the criteria by which the city governs the minimum size of a lot? I mean, we know that over the last 40 years, the size of the average tract home lot has, gone down from just under a quarter acre to a tenth or even less. I mean, I was looking at a property recently, and the entire property was 7,500 square feet, or maybe it was 7,900 square feet. That was not City of Salem. So I guess, when we're looking at these kinds of numbers, are these hard numbers, or do we look at building density?
That would be a Eunice question, Tony.
I was going to hand it to Beth. So we do have a minimum lot size of 4,000 square feet in our single family zones for 1 unit, or 2 units. But as you do 3 units, 4 units, 5 units, our minimum lot size actually gets bigger. So it kind of scales with the number of units. But we do not have a minimum density that governs all housing in our single family zones. As you get into our multifamily zones, we have minimum densities and maximum densities, but we're one of the maybe few cities that don't have a minimum density that applies completely to the single family zone. It only applies to large subdivisions.
Okay, thank you.
I just have one addition just to keep in mind, is within all of these, with having the larger bathrooms, the walk-in, so forth, and is implementing a code of things like sorry, I'm getting a blank, a tankless water heater, or things like that as well, or including the solar water heaters on the roof. And it just came to my mind that that would be beneficial to pretty much all of the disabled community, because that will help control water cost. Also, having extra long length of a shower is important within many diversities within the disability community.
Not to break the fourth wall here, but I think, to the task force, um, one thing that this conversation is bringing up to me when we're thinking about recommendations that we want to provide council and the commission, is this to me demonstrates maybe a need that we've been articulating for some time now, which is to have a body that the city can turn to run ideas by. And so, as we're thinking about this, we're kind of getting beyond the topic of this conversation that that Beth and Eunice have come to talk to us about, but we're making recommendations and we're thinking of things that would be important to sit with and digest on the part of city staff. And as we in turn make our recommendations, it might be worth remembering that and thinking about that is, should there be a body, say, that that is a go-to resource for staff, and the role that we're, in other words, playing in this moment for planning staff, for example. Just a kind of a comment there. Any other questions for Eunice or Beth? Or Beth or Eunice, any questions for us?
I don't think so, but I really appreciate all the input.
And we really do appreciate you and your time, Beth and Eunice, and Beth, especially for the thoroughness of your research and bringing it to us. And a request would be either to this body or the Human Rights Commission, once this body is dissolved in the new year, pending whatever other recommendations come across council's desk, that you come back and engage that body with the reactions of the business community, development community, or any other questions you may have. And we'll continue to have conversations I just alluded to about, the continuity of these conversations and how the city can continue engaging on the question of disability and accessibility in Salem. So really want to thank you again and hope to see you again.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, and invite you to stick around if you're interested. So, but no pressure if not. All right, have a good night. All righty, we're going to pivot to our debriefs of our community engagement conversations that the task force was embarking on this month. The first of which was at Sequoia Crossings, and the second of which was at the library. The Sequoia Crossing drew about maybe 10 to 12 folks who are living in supportive housing. A huge credit to Tony and her organizing and advocacy work that brought people out and engaged in what amounted to, I think it was at or just over 3-hour conversation with commissioners, or excuse me, with members and staff. And so really appreciated that experience. And then there was the encounter at the library, which I think Tony can speak to in greater detail as I was absent. But we really wanted to just, for those who weren't there, and even for those who were, to bring those back to the task force. And I think what I'll likely do is, after this conversation is, at least for the Sequoia Crossings, I will draft maybe a written couple pages of written comment. We took extensive notes, and Gretchen and I can confer and have that be part of the public record, and of course available to all of you, staff included, if you wish, Eunice and Beth, to just kind of sit with and read as we make our way through these conversations and make our way towards recommendations. So I think I'll open up the conversation about Sequoia Crossings and the feedback that we got, just briefly with a again, not enough for my brevity, but with a slight preamble. And that was, it was an interesting conversation, and one that was marked with challenges, accessibility challenges, from the word go, because the community center, which was the location of the conversation, was itself not particularly accessible in that it did not have uh, automatic doors to open. So folks who use mobility aids struggled to get in. One gentleman in particular had a really hard time opening the door and needed assistance to get in through the door. Thinking of two gentlemen who had walkers in particular. Residents brought up, it was obviously a conversation about accessibility for residents across Salem, but as is natural, the conversation tended to focus on their experiences in supportive housing at Sequoia Crossings. Things that they mentioned were really no handicap entrances for shared spaces, extremely heavy doors. One resident even mentioned that they had gotten a concussion from the door closing hard. No support in opening the door, so there were no accessible buttons to open doors, even doors that were on the first floor and purported to be accessible. That included no supportive door opening in the interior rooms, like bathrooms and bedrooms. The showers and bathrooms that were considered accessible were not low entry showers, and they did not come with handrails to support folks getting in and transferring in and out of a wheelchair or mobility device into the shower. And residents described a complicated and sometimes confusing system to request those accommodations, that they were an accommodation as opposed to something that was already in the built environment. Folks described, for example, needing to take a day to go to the doctor, which they may have, as we can all imagine, difficulty getting a doctor's appointment, let alone taking the day to go to the doctor and get that note to support their request for supportive infrastructure. Several residents discussed difficulties around smoke alarms, where beeping and maintenance requests went unanswered for as little as 5 weeks or as long as 3 months, which is particularly problematic for folks, a couple of the residents included, who were discussing that they had maybe psychiatric disabilities or conditions that were triggered by the beeping. One resident described that she had to vacate her unit and go stay with her husband elsewhere because she couldn't deal with the beeping that was going on for weeks and weeks and weeks on end without being fixed, and that there were punitive measures in place that disallowed them as residents to replace the smoke alarms themselves. Taken together, other lifestyle things were addressed, as healthcare access, access to supportive services. One theme that was come to again and again was just how wonderful it is that there are these supportive services, but how chaotic and confusing it can be and overwhelming it might be to really gain access to those supportive services and have them be the support that they are intended to be, especially for folks who are trying to survive, trying to get by, and then inundated with support that combination of support that in turn does not talk to each other, and then with very few point people to support the person navigating all the support, or having high turnover among caseworkers led to, for many folks, real challenges, really painful challenges in navigating support. On that point in particular, I'm not sure if that is a Salem issue. I think that's probably an issue that probably follows a lot of folks through their experiences in supportive housing across the country, but was nevertheless something that really occupied people's minds and in our conversations. So that was a lengthy preamble. I apologize, but that was the thrust of those conversations. Some of them, I hope city staff really take in and think about how to do better, especially because I think a lot of those changes are within the purview of the city and the Salem Housing Authority in particular. But I defer to Christina was there, Tony again was a great help and was there. Robert Marshall was there, and then of course Gretchen was there as well for any comments they'd like to add, and just open up the conversation to folks' questions or reactions. to those themes and takeaways from our conversation at Sequoia Crossings. Please, Christina.
So, yeah, I think for me, I saw or heard a lot about the bureaucracy and the red tape that everybody encounters a lot. Um, and I don't know that there's a solution for that. There's all these programs that people can choose to. This is Daisy. When she knows I'm on camera, she has to be here too. Um, there's all these rules and they're hard to navigate, and we need case managers to help us navigate them, but a case manager from this program can't do things from this program, or they can't find this out for you, or they can't do it. Supportive housing isn't supportive enough, I guess. Was what I was hearing.
Thank you, Christina. Tony, any other takeaways from those conversations that you'd like to share?
Yeah. Well, I live with these people, so this was an opportunity for them to kind of voice their concerns to someone other than me. But I think that one of the biggest problems that we have, not just for the disabled community necessarily, but, especially the disabled community that is unhoused, there is not coordination between the city, the county, and the state and the various services. I can tell you from my own experience, from the moment I became an unhoused person and I got into a shelter, I was told more things that ended up being inaccurate than I was given accurate information. Trying to navigate that system, I spent 15 years working for the state of Oregon, and this was difficult for me. And it was difficult to try to help someone else. And every time you moved from one place to another, because, this was my experience. I became unhoused. I had about a week of time that I spent in a motel trying to figure out what my options were. I had to camp for a week before I got a bed in a shelter. When I got to the shelter, I was told I needed to find a case manager, but nobody told me where or how. And I also knew that the shelter typically only gave you 90 days. And I was a person waiting for Social Security. I was unable to work. It's not like in 90 days I could get a job. But I was fortunate, and at just over my 90 days, then I transferred to Church at the Park, where I then got a caseworker who then could help me with things like getting my birth certificate, but I already had it. Help me with getting my Social Security card, but I already had it. Help me with getting an Oregon ID, but I already had it. So really, when it came to that, the only other thing they could help me with was finding housing. I was told when I got there that, I was asked what my goals were. And, I had family in another town, and we agreed that that would be the plan for me, was to try and transfer me. And then when Sequoia Crossings was opening, I was told I had to fill out the paperwork and I had to take that option, or I would lose my spot at Church at the Park because I was refusing housing. And I asked my caseworker, I said, but this wasn't the plan. I mean, you sat down with me and we had a conversation and you said that I got to be a decision maker in my plan. And that ended up not being true. than I was told about all the support that there would be at Sequoia Crossings when I got there. And I was looking for help with things like I needed to find a new therapist. I needed to find a new primary care physician because mine left. They couldn't help me with those things. Again, the first thing they said when I met with my case manager, do you have a birth certificate? Yes. Do you have a social security card? Yes. Do you have a driver's license or an identification card? Yes. Do you need help with employment? No, I can't work. And at that point, they couldn't help me with anything. So it's really very limited. And there's, you get moved around, you get a new caseworker, and you start all over. So if there's something we could do, even if it was to create a community where the leaders in these different organizations could come together and talk about the common problems and maybe find, build relationships to cover the gaps when we're moving through these situations. And we were promised a lot of things when we got to Sequoia Crossings, and you get that a lot, even when you're unhoused. You go to organizations, they tell you to go to another organization because that organization can help you, and you get there and they can't help you with anything more than the last organization could. So, from my personal experience, the supportive services could not help me with the things that I needed help with. It was very limited what they could help you with.
Is
Thank you
there a
for sharing your
general,
very much. Go ahead, Christine. I'm sorry.
No,
I wanted
is there a general working definition of supportive housing? Like, what does that actually mean?
This is Gretchen. I can jump in. I know that there is. I believe that the definition is guided by Housing and Urban Development federally, but there is a definition. Yeah.
Okay, I would like to learn what that is.
I would too.
I think, Tony's comments just now also spoke to something I walked away feeling, which is, I think I even verbalized this in the moment, which was, I wish there were, I'm making this up at some level, but 5 to 10 things that we guaranteed folks had in supportive housing. And maybe the city can't shoulder all of that, and that's fine. And I believe very much in our direct service providers. I think they do a lot of important work in our communities. But there were just so many folks who said something as simple as, I don't know how to get a phone, or I don't know where my mail is coming, or I don't have a bank account, or I don't know. And it caused kind of snowballing problems in their experiences. And I feel like, from our perspective, as we think about, we're going to have a wide range of recommendations. We're kind of very far reaching, and one of them might be, let's take a look at what sort of uh, support we provide or can provide, or what is possible for folks in those situations, recognizing all of them are unique and different, and not everyone engages with support in the same way, and not all support is received kindly, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. All the caveats aside, I think we could have a more intentional system for folks and ensure that support is supportive as intended. Any other takeaways from that conversation before we transition to the library conversation and wrap up our evening? Dan, did you have your hand raised? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I was just going to kind of add to kind of what you were saying. I would just, is needed, what I'm kind of hearing is essentially a life coach that is assigned to a person. If they move to a different complex, if their situation changes, if they need a ride to the bank, if they need medical records pulled, whatever they need, a life coach wouldn't be bound by medical standards. But that would require a grant from Salem to be able to finance that life coach. But currently, right now in the market, life coaches are extremely expensive. You're looking at people in upper management, in corporate, hiring life coaches to help them become a CEO. But a life coach for a regular average person normally couldn't afford their own life coach.
You know, I don't know if anybody mentioned it at the Sequoia Crossings. There is another resource, which is a mentor. And those, from what I learned, you can get a mentor through Marion County. However, the only ones I could find was you had to have a substance abuse issue. So you could get a mentor from Marion County Behavioral Health. And I didn't qualify. So I couldn't get one of those.
Yeah, I think we had a gentleman from that program come and speak at Roberts. I could call it Roberts Town Hall. It was the HRC's town hall, but the homeless resources town hall, and it's a moving program. But to your point, Tony, how do we expand its scope? And again, this is difficult because all of that is very resource intensive and cost intensive, and that and resources are finite. But how do we think more creatively about it? I think is one of the big takeaways that we'd like to continue sitting with. For
Yeah,
the sake of time, I'm
um,
going to transition over to the library conversation and ask you, Tony, if you had if you wanted to cue us up for that conversation as you were there and I was not.
Sure, but I think Christina had something.
Go ahead, Christina. I'm sorry.
I just a mentor or an ambassador or the super caseworker that that can be the life coach that can handle all the things.
Yeah, well, it just,
Well, and I was chatting with, I think it was Gretchen and Robert. A bot. We could write. I'm sorry, not me. Somebody with coding skills could write a bot that would automatically update on all these various resources and act as a chat bot for supportive housing. It's more complicated than that, but essentially that's what the thought was.
yeah. Well, I think that, we have caseworkers with various organizations. We have mentors, we have peer support. This really is a new industry, that is being created. And Haley, I'm kind of looking towards you as the, workforce organizer. Um, but, we're not delivering these services efficiently when we have all of these different organizations and they're working in silos and they're not communicating with each other. They're working with the exact same people. And most of the people that came to Sequoia Crossings, that was their biggest issue, was the lack of continuity. And every time they got moved to a new place, they felt like they were starting over. And even though now they've, been in this apartment 6 months to a year or so, they're still not moving forward because they can't find the right person to help them with the things that they need to do, like, go to a bank and open a bank account so they can get rid of their net spend Social Security card that they're having problems with and things like that, So it just seems like to me, even if the city just created an event where these people in this, arena of service delivery could come, and it would probably help them too, help them to solve problems, streamline, services. I really, that was what was such a surprise to me, was that so much of it when I became homeless, I had to figure it out myself. And, and I have reading comprehension and literacy at my disposal. And a lot of these people do not. They do not. They get a big old envelope in the mail from an organization and it's time sensitive and they need to do something and they're struggling with, getting groceries. It's just, so sorry, I'll get off my soapbox now.
Thank you. I wanted to make sure, Dan, you were trying to jump in earlier. Did you have something to add before we move forward?
I was just kind of on that subject. We already have something in place to do that, but just the way it's structured isn't
Yes.
for that. So for example, with the DHS, it's county based, correct?
No, DHS is state.
It is state. Well, there's direct support workers.
Mhm.
And when you fall under a certain disability, you get assigned a direct support worker. I'm seeing children getting assigned 40, 50, 60 hours a week of direct support so that their families can go to work. But what I don't see is adults like you and I that get a direct support worker because we are struggling to fill out forms. Because we can't, when we're jumping around, filling all that out and doing all that paperwork becomes difficult. And so I think something as structured as a direct support worker for, even if for myself, if I had a direct support for 2 hours a week, I'd be much more set on making sure I get some of my tasks done. But right now, there's not really a opening for that limited basis.
Yeah. Yeah.
I really appreciate this conversation, and Tony, stay on the soapbox. I think this is an important conversation that we hope to continue in the months ahead, and I really value and grateful for your leadership and lived experience in this area in particular. I just really do thank you for all the work that you've been doing and will continue to do. So,
Thank you.
and not to turn the mic back over to you, but if you wouldn't mind queuing up the library conversation and we can close out this portion of the agenda.
Yeah. So on Wednesday, Gretchen and I were at the library and we had 5 people plus council member Dr. Brown came, which was really great. At first, he was like, I'm just going to sit over here in the corner and observe, but he actually engaged and with 2 of the gentlemen that were there. One was in a power chair, the other one was in a manual chair. He was more physically active, so I don't know what they're called, the more streamlined. They found out that they lived, within a few minutes of each other in Ward 5, which is also Dr. Brown's ward. So they made plans for Dr. Brown to spend a day with them on a day when they need to run errands and accomplish things. So that I thought was a nice addition. We had another gentleman who lived downtown and was vision impaired, had a service dog. We got most of the conversation here was about build environment, but they came prepared with very specific things, and Gretchen took excellent notes, thank goodness. So it was a really good conversation. I wish we'd had more people. There had been a big accident on Lancaster, and I think some people were unable to get there, but we did share about the future events, the one at Center 50 Plus that's going to be open to the public, and they were going to get the word out and hope more people from their community joins us. Did I miss anything?
I think that's perfect, Tony. And I do have notes from both, and my aim is to get a nice summary typed up for the task force. And like Joaquin said, there may be things folks can add to the summaries as well.
Thank you. Christina, go ahead.
I do want to suggest that we have some sort of format to follow, especially if we have a lot of participants. We may want to time limit folks. Also, uh, I thought we should have tried a little more redirection into conversations of things that we can have an impact on.
Yeah,
Uh,
we have.
so I want to protect us from getting listening fatigue, I guess. But also I want to hear what people have to say. And I'm just concerned at, like, say at Center 50 Plus, I know there's very active community there. You know, what if there's a lot of people that show up and we want to get through everybody?
Yeah, I think it's very community dependent, Christina. Gretchen and Robert and I have talked a lot about it even before we started the outreach. At a place like Center 50 Plus, if there's 50 people who come and want to talk, probably can't get to everybody. So we might break up into different smaller groups, or if folks feel more comfortable talking individually as opposed to group setting, that's definitely one way to do it. The library was an intimate setting, so was Sequoia Crossings, a lot more flexibility. So I think it really just depends on on um, on the situation. We have not been inundated yet, for better or for worse, and so we'll see as our outreach ramps up what the context demands. But the point is very well taken. It can be overwhelming on the part of the listener and uh, our part trying to do some good with what we hear out in the community. Haley, go ahead.
Christina, could you specify to me what you mean by the things we can affect or control, I guess, in the sense of what people should be talking about? Because I feel like this task force should be, I know the information fatigue can be a lot, but there's every person is going to have a different, it's the
When
lack of
when
accessibility is going to be different.
right, but
Yeah.
when things turn to more of a conversation about philosophy or things like
Oh,
that,
okay.
we need to redirect individuals back to the topic at hand.
Okay. Thank you. Sorry, my brain just went to like 20 other different things. So I need the specification.
Okay, that's okay.
I think Christina's referring to her last half an hour at Circular Crossings. There was a gentleman who was had a lot to share, but everyone else had left, so we were just kind of sitting around and talking, and it was just the end of our conversation. So the point is well taken, though. Any questions for Tony or Gretchen about the library? And if not, Gretchen, I'll turn it over to you in terms of a reminder to us. We have a couple of events left in our timeline, and then any staff updates you may have. We're
I
coming up. We're coming up at the end of our meeting time. So
Okay, I have one more a quick thing. I was thinking that um this kind of is in line with a lot of the talk that's been going on regarding public safety, especially downtown. I was thinking to hear from the population that's being impacted by that conversation, we might want to see about doing a listening session over at the Rock Center. They do programming during the day. There's typically a lot of people there during the day, uh, either hanging out, going in for services or programming, and they serve soup there. Uh, so uh, on one hand, the city has sought feedback from businesses, and they are doing a listening session on the 20th with um, advocates for the unsheltered, etc. But I think, why don't we just go directly to the people that are being talked about?
That I think would, sorry.
Please, yeah.
I think that would be possible. I do have several contacts over there and I could talk to them about that. And it would be a good place to go. Rock that's where I went every day when I had to leave the shelter for the day. Good staff. And they do deal with, they don't just deal with the homeless population. They have people from the community, disabled members of the community who come for certain activities. That was part of their move from Silverton Road to the new site, was because there were so many stairs at the old building. There was one ramp at the front of the building, and it was not convenient to their smoking area and things like that. So I would be more than willing to reach out to them if that's what we want to pursue.
I mean, I use their services. They have a trauma support group that I go to. So
Yeah, Tony, not to put labor on you, but if you would like to begin that conversation, and Gretchen and I, or Gretchen can work with you to figure that out, and see what we can get in our calendar. We're not even at the end of summer, and we have time going into the fall. So if others have uh, you know ideas about outreach, definitely bring them to us, and we'll see what we can do. Even reaching out to service providers themselves in some capacity might be uh, worth doing as well. But no, thank you, Christina, for that idea, and thank you, Tony, for the offer.
This is Gretchen. Absolutely. I'll look forward to helping set that up for the group. In addition, we're scheduled at Center 50, as you mentioned earlier, in a gathering that would be open to the public on Monday, September 15th at 1 p.m. And then we also have a gathering in partnership with Dan at Neurodiverse Inclusive Solutions, which is a focused conversation for folks in this community, scheduled for Wednesday, September 17th at 6 p.m. And I'll pause there, and Dan, and see if you wanted to add anything.
I would just add that I have spoken one-on-one with about 50 different people in the Salem area. There's a strong interest, but I'm having many hesitate to be willing to speak up, or even to explain why they're unable to speak up. But I feel like this highlights the disability itself, and it highlights that the community doesn't always feel safe in these environments. So I'm actually going to continue to reach out to this group one-on-one, and see about options of having them join through Zoom, and doing surveys and doing things in written communication as well. So I'm going to explore multiple options, but the September 17th listening session will still remain on track.
Thank you so much. And then we're also talking with folks out at Shangri-La about a gathering with some of the individuals in the Life Enrichment Activities Program, and that date and time is TBD. And that's Dan's mention of alternative ways of connecting is a great reminder. We have a QR code that could take you to the online survey. And then we also have print copies of a survey if someone would like to do like a hard copy, and then we can enter it in. So we have alternate ways of sharing information as well. Kind of built on your conversation a couple meetings ago about giving folks a chance to share their story as well as their ideas for making Salem better. And then it also collects some demographic information as the folks are interested in sharing it. And yeah, Joaquin, I don't have any other staff updates, so that's just what's coming up. So it's exciting to see. We've got the conversations in September, and it sounds like maybe 2 more to join in if we can secure something with Rock and with Shangri-La. We should have 4 good conversations then coming up.
Can I ask the event on the 17th with Dan's group? Do we have a location?
We do. That's at the Salem Public Library as well.
Okay.
Yep. And that one's at 6 p.m. And I've set it for the collaboration studio. And so we'll have to visit about if that will continue to work.
Thank you, Gretchen, and thank you, Dan, for your continued effort to ensure that folks feel that they can come to that event and share what they can with us, and trust us with their stories. So thank you for that work, and thank you, Gretchen, for your updates. Any member remarks or announcements? All righty. Well, then with that, it is 7:28, and I thank you all for your time and thank our guests again, Eunice and Beth, so much for being here and wish you all a lovely evening. Take care.
Yes, Beth, thank you very much.